In 2005, property management company RealPage introduced its new software product, YieldStar, an algorithmic pricing tool for rental properties, promising to outperform the market 3 to 7%. In the years since, RealPage has dominated the multifamily housing industry, merging with its only significant competitor and becoming known as the Amazon of property management software. As it's grown, testimonials have come pouring in of landlords who consistently find themselves beating the market in good times and in bad. Is this a case of innovation providing a competitive advantage to savvy property managers? Or is it, as has been alleged in courts across the country, the case of an illegal conspiracy? Hi, I'm Roto, and this is the Fair Share Files. To begin at the beginning, let's look into Jeffrey Roper, the man behind the algorithm. A self-described numbers nerd, Roper created the YieldStar algorithm in 2005. But this wasn't the first algorithm he was involved with. In the 1980s, Roper was director of Alaska Airlines when, according to ProPublica, Alaska and other airlines, quote, began using common software to share prices and routes with each other before they became public. Roper soon saw his computer and documents being whisked away by federal agents. According to Roper, we all got called up before the Department of Justice in the early 1980s because we were colluding. We had no idea. According to a class action suit in Tennessee, Roper's new algorithm, YieldStar, and its second-generation predecessor, AI Revenue Management, collect data from multifamily property managers, including actual rents paid for each unit and each floor plan, occupancy rates, detailed records of lease transactions, move-in and move-out dates, and amenities. This information is then fed into the algorithm, which recommends to property managers a suggested rental rate for each lease transaction. According to lawsuits in Washington, D.C., Arizona, and Tennessee, this data sharing among competitors violates both state and federal antitrust laws and constitutes illegal price fixing. But what makes the use of an algorithm illegal? In 2017, Margaret K. Olhausen, then acting chair of the Federal Trade Commission, gave a speech subtitled, "Some Initial Thoughts on the Intersection of Antitrust Law and Algorithmic Pricing." Olhausen made clear that what was at issue was not the fact of using an algorithm, but how the algorithm works. Or, in her own words, an algorithm is a tool, and like any other tool, it can be either put to useful purposes or to nefarious ends. To explain this further, she told a story of 3 gas stations. I'm going to read directly from her speech. I want you to imagine a small rural town somewhere in the desert Southwest. This little town is modest and utterly unremarkable in every way. But in the center of town, clustered around the only stoplight, are 3 gas stations. These 3 stations have the only gas for sale within 150 miles in every direction. The date is 1970, so this is a time with no internet, no personal computers, no cell phones, and certainly no algorithmic pricing. All 3 gas stations currently charge exactly the same price for a gallon of gas. Prices may go up and down as the wholesale price of gasoline moves, but all 3 stations generally charge identical prices and have been charging essentially identical prices for years. All of that is about to change. At 6 a.m. one bright, clear Monday morning, the owner of the first gas station gets out his ladder and leans it against the big price sign out front. He then climbs up the ladder and changes the price, making it 5 cents a gallon more expensive. Then he takes his ladder down, walks over to a lawn chair in the shade, and sits down to have a cup of coffee. At 10 a.m., he gets the ladder back out and lowers his price back down 5 cents, so his price is now the same as everybody else's price. He repeats that same pattern of behavior every Monday morning. He never directly talks to his competitors about the prices he is charging or why he is doing what he did. Has he violated the antitrust laws just by changing his price for 4 hours? If that is all he has done, the answer is no. Generally, firms are free to set whatever prices they choose, as long as they act independently. Nor would it be unlawful for one of the other gas stations to decide on his own to follow the lead of our analog era friend with the ladder and start raising his own prices on Monday mornings. Even if all the stations in town ultimately decide to follow the lead of the first station and raise prices 5 cents, then keep those high prices in place, the antitrust laws do not condemn this behavior. Olhausen then goes on to explain the use of an algorithmic tool which would not violate antitrust laws. Again, reading directly from Olhausen's speech. Going back to my gas station example, if the market participants cannot see their competitors' posted prices easily with their naked eyes, they might decide to buy a pair of binoculars to read their competitors' signs better from the comfort of their offices. The binoculars make it easier for the market participants to understand market conditions more quickly and respond accordingly. It is certainly true that the binoculars increase transparency in the market and thereby make it easier for informal, tacit coordination to take place. But we don't use the antitrust laws to police firms' abilities to understand the markets they operate in or to optimize prices. We may recognize that the binoculars make it easier to understand the behavior of competitors, and that fact in turn becomes part of the calculus in evaluating future mergers in this space. But we don't ban the use of binoculars just because they can be used to assist in conscious parallelism. Unilateral efforts to understand market conditions better and respond to them are a critical part of a well-functioning economy. This is just not a place where antitrust needs to impose new rules in response to new tools. If RealPage's algorithm functioned like a set of binoculars, enabling a competitor to more easily understand market conditions, this would not violate state or federal antitrust laws. So when would the use of an algorithm violate antitrust law? According to Olhausen, that's the point when our friend with the ladder gets down and walks over to his competitors to talk about prices. She says, once competitors reach an agreement setting price or output, they are engaged in a behavior with no social utility, and an enforcement response by the government is warranted. An algorithm can violate antitrust laws in 2 ways. First, when the algorithm functions as what Olhausen calls, quote, a collusion vehicle. She says, in this scenario, the algorithms are programmed to produce some sort of signal to the market, a signal that only the other market participants, similarly armed with algorithms of their own, will be able to detect. Through those signals, competitors reach an agreement on prices or output levels. The executives are still communicating with each other, but now they are using algorithms, essentially to fly under the radar, so their unlawful agreements can escape detection by the enforcement agencies. She goes on to say, the type of technology used to communicate with competitors is wholly irrelevant to the legal analysis. Whether it is phone calls, text messages, algorithms, or Morse code, the underlying legal rule is the same. Agreements to set prices among competitors are always unlawful. The second way an algorithm can violate antitrust laws is by functioning as a, quote, hub of conspiracy. In this scenario, the competitors do not directly share their pricing strategies with one another, but share them with an independent vendor who then programs the algorithm with the provided private pricing strategies. Olhausen makes the argument as to why this is illegal. Just as the antitrust laws do not allow competitors to exchange competitively sensitive information directly in an effort to stabilize or control industry pricing, they also prohibit using an intermediary to facilitate the exchange of confidential business information. She goes on to explain, let's just change the terms of the hypothetical slightly to understand why. Everywhere the word algorithm appears, please just insert the words, a guy named Bob. Is it okay for a guy named Bob to collect confidential price strategy information from all the participants in a market and then tell everybody how they should price? If it isn't okay for a guy named Bob to do it, then it probably isn't okay for an algorithm to do it either. According to the state of Arizona, the District of Columbia, and the class action suit in Tennessee, This is precisely what RealPage has done. Collected non-public information from supposed competitors, allowing them to collude on pricing. RealPage, for its part, argues that it is a victim to what it calls, quote, false and misleading claims about its software. It argues that landlords only accept its pricing suggestions on new leases less than 50% of the time, and that, quote, RealPage does not set customers' prices. But the Federal Trade Commission and the Department of Justice published a joint legal brief arguing that sharing non-public information is still illegal, even if, according to a summary by the FTC, quote, co-conspirators retain some pricing discretion or cheat on the agreement. The effect of RealPage's adoption by the multifamily industry on the price of housing is a matter of controversy. According to RealPage, its pricing algorithm is only used by 7% of multifamily property owners nationwide and doesn't have the market saturation necessary to have any real effect on pricing. But lawsuits across the country point to market saturation in specific metro areas, including 48% of the multifamily rental market in Nashville, 50% in Charlotte, and 53% in Atlanta. In the Washington, D.C., Arlington, Alexandria metro area, the Attorney General alleges that, quote, 90% of the units in large buildings are priced using RealPage software. Democratic Senators Ron Wyden and Peter Welch have introduced legislation to clarify antitrust rules and ensure pricing collusion in the real estate industry via algorithm remains illegal. In a press release, Wyden said, setting prices via algorithm is no different from doing it over cigars and whiskey in a private club. Although it's my view that these cartels are already violating existing antitrust laws, I want the law to be painfully clear that algorithmic price fixing of rents is a crime. To date, 9 Democratic senators and 9 Democratic representatives have signed on to the bill, and it has been endorsed by the American Economic Liberties Project, the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, and the National Alliance to End Homelessness. In August 2024, the Department of Justice filed an antitrust suit against RealPage, declaring that Americans should not have to pay more in rent because a company has found a new way to scheme with landlords to break the law. And at a campaign event in Raleigh, North Carolina, presidential candidate Kamala Harris vowed to fight for a law that would crack down on algorithmic price fixing in the housing market. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. To support the Fair Share Files and free content about economic justice, click the link in the description and sign up for Patreon. Patrons will receive access to scripts with citations, resources for further research, and a pre-written letter to urge your legislators to support the Preventing the Algorithmic Facilitation of Housing Cartels Act. Members who join at the founding patron tier will receive a credit at the end of every episode.